The Cathara refugee ships drifted through the void like broken dreams made manifest. Captain Zethara stood on the bridge of the lead vessel, watching the blue-green planet grow larger on the view screen. Earth. The humans called it Earth. Behind her, the navigation officer's voice trembled as he spoke. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. They're asking about our intentions." Zethara's four arms moved in a gesture of weary resignation. 3 months ago, the Cathara had been a proud species with 17 colonies spread across the Andromeda sector. Then the Devourers came. The insectoid swarm had consumed everything in their path, leaving only empty space where thriving worlds once existed. The Cathara fleet had barely escaped with 50,000 survivors crammed into ships never meant for long-term habitation. Children cried from hunger in the cargo bays. The elderly lay dying in makeshift medical centers. Hope was a luxury they could no longer afford. "Open the channel," Zethara commanded, straightening her elongated frame. The humans had been the only species to respond to their distress calls. Every other civilization had either ignored them or actively told them to stay away. The galaxy had learned to fear the Devourers, and refugees carried the stench of doom. A human face appeared on the screen. The creature was smaller than a Cathara, with only 2 arms and strange hair covering its head, but its eyes held something Zethara had almost forgotten existed. Compassion. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force," the human said. "We received your distress signal. What assistance do you require?" Zethara felt her throat constrict. In all their travels, no one had asked what they needed. They had only been told what they could not have. "Admiral Chen," she began, her voice catching slightly. "I am Captain Zethara of the Cathara refugee fleet. We seek only temporary refuge while we search for a new home. Our people are dying. Our children have not seen solid ground in months. We ask for nothing permanent, just a place to rest and resupply." Admiral Chen's expression remained steady. "Captain, how many ships are in your fleet?" 47 vessels carrying 50,000 souls." The human was quiet for a moment, and Zethara braced herself for another rejection. She had heard all the excuses before. Resources were limited. Their own people came first. The risk was too great. "Captain Zethara," Admiral Chen finally said, "we're transmitting landing coordinates for the continent of Australia. Our teams are already preparing refugee centers with food, medical supplies, and temporary housing. We'll have everything ready by the time your ships arrive." Zethara stared at the screen, certain she had misunderstood. "Admiral, you haven't even consulted with your government. Don't you need approval?" A slight smile crossed the human's face. "Captain, the day we turn away refugees is the day we stop being human. Consider Earth your home for as long as you need it." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's engines. Zethara's communications officer wiped tears from her eyes with 3 of her 4 hands. The navigation officer had stopped pretending to work and was openly staring at the screen. "There is something you must know," Zethara said, forcing herself to speak the truth that might change everything. "The Devourers track refugee movements. They follow the scent of fear and desperation across space. By harboring us, you may be inviting their attention." Admiral Chen's smile faded, replaced by something harder. "Captain, how long do we have?" "Based on their previous patterns, perhaps 6 months. Maybe less if they detect our energy signatures here." The human nodded slowly. "Then we'll use that time wisely. Captain Zethara, begin your descent. Our people are waiting for you." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Zethara looked around at her crew, seeing the same disbelief in their faces that she felt in her heart. "Captain," the communications officer whispered, "they're really going to help us?" Before Zethara could answer, new transmissions began flooding in from the planet below. Hospitals were clearing entire wings for Cathara patients. Schools were preparing special programs for refugee children. Thousands of human volunteers were organizing supply drives and offering their homes to families. As the fleet descended through Earth's atmosphere, Zethara watched cities grow larger through the view screen. She had expected to see military installations and defensive positions. Instead, she saw banners stretched between buildings with messages of welcome, written in carefully learned Cathara script. The landing zone in Australia was a marvel of organization. Prefabricated buildings stretched across the landscape like a small city. Human workers rushed between structures making final preparations. Medical teams stood ready with equipment specifically modified for Cathara physiology. When Zethara's ship touched down, she felt solid ground beneath her feet for the first time in months. The sensation was overwhelming. A group of humans approached, led by a tall woman with graying hair. "Captain Zethara, I'm Director Martinez of the Earth Refugee Settlement Agency. We established our organization about 6 hours ago, specifically to help your people. If you'll follow me, I'll show you what we've prepared." As they walked through the settlement, Zethara saw human children playing with young Cathara, their laughter mixing in the warm afternoon air. Elderly humans sat with Cathara elders, sharing stories despite the language barrier. Medical teams worked tirelessly to treat the sick and wounded. "Why?" Zethara asked Director Martinez as they paused outside a building marked as a school. "Why would your people do this for strangers?" Martinez looked up at the Cathara captain with those strange human eyes that seemed to hold depths of emotion. "Because, Captain, we remember what it's like to be afraid. We remember what it's like to have nowhere to go. And we decided long ago that no one should face that alone." That night, as Zethara lay in the first real bed she had known in months, she listened to the sounds of her people settling into their new temporary home. Children's laughter drifted through the windows. Adults spoke in hushed tones about the humans' kindness, but beneath the relief and gratitude, a cold fear gnawed at her stomach. The humans had given them everything without asking for anything in return. When the devourers came, and they would come, these generous people would face a horror they couldn't imagine. Zethara stared at the ceiling and made a silent promise. Whatever happened, the Kithra would not let their saviors stand alone. 3 weeks had passed since the Kythera fleet landed on Earth. Captain Zethara walked through the refugee settlement each morning, marveling at how quickly her people had begun to heal. The children ran between the buildings without the haunted look that had plagued them during the escape. The elderly sat in circles sharing stories with human volunteers who listened with patience and genuine interest. But Zethara knew this peace was temporary. She had requested a meeting with Admiral Chen to discuss the approaching threat. The humans needed to understand what was coming. The meeting took place in a secure facility in what the humans called Canberra. Zethara found herself facing not just Admiral Chen, but an entire room full of Earth's military leadership. Generals, admirals, and officials from every major nation sat around a large table, their faces serious and attentive. "Captain Zethara," Admiral Chen began, "you mentioned the Devourers would likely follow your trail. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." Zethara activated a holographic projector, filling the room with images that made several humans recoil in disgust. The Devourers looked like a nightmare fusion of insect and machine, their bodies covered in chitinous armor and mechanical augmentations. Swarms of them moved like living tsunamis across planetary surfaces. "The Devourers consume everything," Zethara explained, her voice steady despite the memories the images brought back. "Organic matter, minerals, even the atmosphere itself. They strip planets bare in a matter of days, then move to the next target. Their ships number in the millions, and they have consumed 17 civilizations in the past decade." General Harrison, a stern-faced human with silver hair, leaned forward. "What kind of weapons do they use?" "They are the weapon," Zethara replied. "Each devourer is a living creature enhanced with mechanical parts. They spit acid that can melt through starship hulls. Their claws can tear through reinforced armor, but their greatest strength is their numbers. When they attack, the sky turns black with their swarms." The room fell silent. Several humans exchanged glances that spoke of growing concern. Finally, Admiral Chen spoke up. "Captain, how many ships were you able to field against them?" The Kythera defense fleet consisted of 800 vessels at the time of the first attack. "We had some of the most advanced shielding technology in the galaxy. We lasted 6 hours. The silence stretched longer this time. Zethara could see the humans calculating the odds in their heads. Earth's fleet was smaller than what the Kythera had possessed. Their technology, while impressive for their age, was not as advanced as what the Devourers had already overwhelmed. "There's something else," Zethara continued, bringing up another hologram. "The Devourers don't just attack randomly. They're led by what we call the Hive Queens. These creatures are massive, intelligent, and they plan their assaults carefully. The queen that destroyed our worlds is called Zarthak the Endless Hunger. She will come here specifically because she knows we found refuge." A younger human officer raised his hand. "Captain, you make it sound like we don't stand a chance." Why are you telling us this instead of encouraging us to find you another planet? Zathara looked around the room, meeting each human's eyes in turn. Because in all our travels and all the species we encountered while fleeing, only humanity offered us help. Only you opened your doors to strangers who brought nothing but danger. I will not see our saviors face this threat unprepared. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. What do you recommend? Evacuation, Zathara said without hesitation. Get as many humans off-world as possible. Find colonies far from here. The Devourers will come, and when they do, Earth will fall just like our worlds did. The room erupted in discussion. Voices rose as humans debated the possibility of abandoning their homeworld. General Harrison slammed his hand on the table for silence. Captain Zathara, he said firmly, humanity doesn't run. We've never run. We won't start now. Then you will die, Zathara replied bluntly, and your deaths will accomplish nothing except feeding the swarm. Admiral Chen stood up, her expression thoughtful. Captain, you said your fleet lasted 6 hours. What if we had more time to prepare? What if we knew exactly when and where they were coming? Zathara tilted her head, confused by the question. Admiral, preparation won't matter. The numbers are too overwhelming. Even if you had perfect intelligence, perfect positioning, perfect weapons, the swarm would simply absorb your attacks and keep coming. A human scientist at the far end of the table spoke up. Captain, you're thinking like someone who fights conventional battles. Humanity has a saying, if you can't win playing by the rules, change the rules. I don't understand. Admiral Chen smiled, and there was something in that expression that reminded Zathara of a predator. Captain, every species you've encountered has tried to fight the Devourers in space ship to ship, right? Of course. That's how space battles are fought. Not by humans, General Harrison said, his own smile matching the Admiral's. Captain, would you be willing to work with our scientists and military planners? We have some ideas, but we need to understand Devourer biology and behavior better. Zathara hesitated. She had expected the humans to accept the inevitable and begin evacuation procedures. Instead, they seemed to be planning for war against impossible odds. Admiral, I've seen what the Devourers can do. I've watched civilizations with technology far beyond yours fall in hours. What could you possibly do differently? Admiral Chen walked to a wall display showing Earth from orbit. Captain Zathara, humans have a long history of being outnumbered and outgunned. We've learned to be creative, but more than that, we've learned something that might surprise you. What's that? We've learned that the best defense isn't always about having the biggest guns or the strongest shields. Sometimes the best defense is making the other side wish they'd never started a fight in the first place. That evening, Zathara walked through the refugee settlement, her mind churning with the day's conversations. The humans were planning something, but their confidence seemed to border on madness. How could they possibly believe they could succeed where advanced civilizations had failed? She stopped at the edge of the settlement, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Queen Zarthak was following their trail, bringing death and devastation closer each day. In perhaps 5 months, maybe less, the Devourers would arrive at Earth. Behind her, she heard human children playing with young Cathara, their voices mixing in the evening air. She saw human families hosting Cathara refugees in their homes, sharing meals and stories despite the language barriers. She watched human doctors working around the clock to heal the sick and wounded among her people. For the first time since the attacks began, Zathara found herself hoping that the humans might be right. Perhaps there was something different about this species. Perhaps their confidence wasn't madness, but wisdom born from a history she didn't yet understand. The stars held no answers, but they did hold a promise. Soon, very soon, the galaxy would learn what happened when someone threatened humanity's guests. 2 months had passed since the meeting in Canberra, and Captain Zathara barely recognized Earth anymore. What had once been a peaceful blue-green world had transformed into something that defied everything she knew about military preparation. The humans weren't building more ships or strengthening their orbital defenses as she had expected. Instead, they had turned their entire planet into something unprecedented. Massive construction projects operated around the clock on every continent. The humans called it Project Sanctuary. Zathara stood in the command center they had built near the refugee settlement, watching screens that showed the planet's transformation. Dr. Rebecca Stone, the lead scientist on the project, approached with a tablet full of data. Captain, I wanted to show you the latest progress reports, Dr. Stone said. her eyes bright with excitement despite the dark circles beneath them. We've completed the first phase of the planetary defense grid. These aren't normal weapons platforms, Zethara observed, studying the images. The structures looked more like enormous metal flowers than military installations. No, they're not weapons at all, Dr. Stone confirmed. They're what we call gravity wells. Each one can create localized gravitational fields strong enough to trap devourer swarms in specific areas. Zethara stared at the human scientist in confusion. You want to trap them? Dr. Stone, trapping the devourers just concentrates their numbers. It makes them more dangerous, not less. Dr. Stone's smile widened. That's the beauty of it, Captain. We don't want to defeat them in conventional combat. We want to control where they go and what they do. Before Zethara could ask for clarification, Admiral Chen arrived with a group of military engineers. The Admiral looked tired but determined, her uniform bearing the stains of long hours in planning rooms and construction sites. Captain Zethara, Admiral Chen said, I want to show you something that might change your perspective on our chances. They traveled by aircraft to what had once been the Sahara Desert. Where Zethara expected to see sand dunes, she instead found the largest construction project she had ever witnessed. Millions of humans worked alongside automated machinery to build something that stretched beyond the horizon. What is this? Zethara asked, her voice filled with awe. We call it the Crucible, Admiral Chen replied. It's designed to withstand devourer acid and claw attacks. But more importantly, it's designed to channel them exactly where we want them to go. Zethara studied the massive structure. It looked like an enormous maze with walls hundreds of meters high. The construction materials were unfamiliar, gleaming with an oily rainbow sheen. The walls are made from a composite we developed specifically for this project, Dr. Stone explained. It incorporates Cathera shield technology that your engineers shared with us, combined with materials we've never used in construction before. What materials? Admiral Chen's expression grew grim. Nuclear waste. Depleted uranium. Every toxic, radioactive, or poisonous substance we could find. The walls aren't just physical barriers, Captain. They're death incarnate. Zethara felt a chill run through her body. Admiral, you've built a trap that will kill anything that touches it. That's the idea. But the radiation will poison your own planet. Dr. Stone stepped forward. Captain, we've calculated the risks. The Crucible is designed with containment fields that will prevent radiation leakage under normal conditions. It will only become deadly when the containment is deliberately breached. Zethara looked between the two humans, finally beginning to understand the scope of their plan. You're going to lure the devourers into this maze and then poison them. It's more complicated than that, Admiral Chen said. The gravity wells will pull the swarms down to the planet's surface and guide them toward the Crucible. Once they're inside, we'll activate the containment breach and flood the entire structure with lethal radiation. And then what? You'll have killed perhaps a few million devourers, but Queen Zarthak commands billions. She'll simply send more swarms while staying safely in orbit. Admiral Chen and Dr. Stone exchanged a look that made Zethara even more nervous. Captain, Dr. Stone said carefully, we've been studying your records of Queen Zarthak's behavior patterns. She doesn't just command from orbit. When a planet offers significant resistance, she comes down personally to lead the final assault. The pieces clicked together in Zethara's mind, and she felt her blood turn cold. You're planning to assassinate her. We're planning to invite her to dinner, Admiral Chen corrected. The Crucible isn't just a trap for her swarms. It's bait designed specifically for her psychology. Our xenopsychologists believe that when she sees her children dying in the maze, she'll become enraged enough to enter the structure herself. Zethara stared at the humans in horror. This plan requires you to sacrifice your entire planet as bait. Even if you succeed in killing Zarthak, Earth will be irradiated and uninhabitable. Not the entire planet, Dr. Stone said quietly. We've built 17 crucibles on different continents. Each one is designed to handle a specific type of assault. But you're right about the radiation. Those areas will be dead zones for centuries. Your people will lose their home just as mine did. Admiral Chen placed a hand on Zethara's shoulder. The gesture surprisingly gentle despite the human's small size. Captain, the difference is that we're choosing to sacrifice parts of our world to save the rest. Your people didn't have that choice. That evening, Zethara called a meeting of the Kythera Council of Elders. The refugee leaders gathered in the community center the humans had built, their faces grave as she explained what she had learned. Elder Morthak, the eldest among them, spoke first. These humans are madder than we believed possible. They plan to turn their own world into a weapon. But it might work, Elder Silana argued. If they can kill Queen Zarthak, the swarm will be disrupted. Other queens will fight for control instead of pursuing us. At the cost of making Earth uninhabitable, Morthak replied. Is this the price we want our saviors to pay? Zethara looked around the circle of elders, seeing the same struggle in their faces that she felt in her heart. The humans had given them everything without asking for payment. Now they were preparing to sacrifice their world to protect it. There is another option, she said slowly. We could leave. Take our ships and flee before the Devourers arrive. The humans would have no reason to implement their plan if we weren't here. Elder Silana's laugh was bitter. And where would we go, Zethara? Every other species in the galaxy turned us away. Only humanity opened their doors. Then we face a choice, Elder Morthak said solemnly. Do we flee and let our hosts face the consequences of their kindness alone? Or do we stay and watch them destroy their world to save it? Zethara stood up, her forearms moving in the gesture of formal decision. There is a third option, elders. We have 47 ships and 50,000 people. Our fleet may have been broken, but our knowledge remains intact. Our technology can still contribute to their efforts. What are you proposing? We help them make their plan work. But more than that, we make sure the humans don't have to pay the full price for saving us. If Earth must become a weapon, then we'll help ensure that weapon strikes true and swift. The elders looked at each other, and Zethara saw understanding dawn in their eyes. The humans had offered them a home and defended it with unimaginable sacrifice. Now it was time for the guests to help protect their hosts. The next morning, Zethara walked into Admiral Chen's office and laid out detailed plans for Cathara contribution to Project Sanctuary. The human admiral studied the documents with growing amazement. Captain, these modifications could increase our chances of success by several 100%. Admiral Chen, Zethara replied, you gave us a home when no one else would. Now let us help you defend it. 4 months after the Kethera arrival, Earth's transformation was complete. Captain Zethara stood on the bridge of the redesigned command ship Defiance, watching the final preparations through the viewscreen. The vessel combined human engineering with Cathara technology, creating something entirely new. Around the planet, gravity wells hummed with contained power. The 17 crucibles waited like hungry mouths on the continents below. In orbit, a small fleet of human ships took their positions, not to fight the Devourers directly, but to guide them toward the traps. Captain, we're receiving the signal, reported Lieutenant Torres from the communication station. Long-range sensors detect the Devourer fleet at the edge of the system. Zethara felt her hearts racing. After months of preparation, the moment had finally arrived. Through the viewscreen, she could see Admiral Chen on the bridge of the Earth Defense Command ship. The human leader looked calm, but Zethara had learned to recognize the signs of controlled tension in human faces. How many ships? Zethara asked. Initial count shows approximately 12 million vessels, Torres replied, his voice steady despite the overwhelming numbers. Queen Zarthak's flagship is confirmed among them. 12 million. The number was even larger than the force that had destroyed the Kethra homeworld. Zethara closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the screams of her people as their cities burned. When she opened them again, her expression was determined. All stations, prepare for Operation Hospitality, she announced over the ship's communication system. On the planet below, millions of humans evacuated from the crucible zones while essential personnel took their positions in heavily shielded bunkers. The Cathara refugees had volunteered to help operate the defense systems, their knowledge of Devourer behavior proving invaluable to the targeting computers. The Devourer fleet approached like a dark storm cloud, blotting out the stars as it advanced. At their head flew Queen Zarthak's massive bioship, a living creature the size of a small moon. Its surface writhed with millions of smaller Devourers clinging to its hull. They're broadcasting their standard demand for surrender, Torres reported. Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication channel. Captain Zethara, are your people ready? We are, Admiral. The gravity wells are charged and the crucibles are active. Then let's show our guests some Earth hospitality. The first phase began with what appeared to be a panicked retreat. Human ships fled from the advancing swarm, broadcasting desperate messages about system failures and broken defenses. The performance was convincing enough that the Devourers took the bait, pursuing the fleeing vessels toward the planet. As the swarm entered the gravity well field, the trap was sprung. Invisible forces grabbed millions of Devourers, pulling them down toward the planet's surface. The creatures screeched in fury as they found themselves unable to break free from the artificial gravity. Zathara watched through her instruments as the first swarms hit the crucible in Australia. The massive creatures poured into the maze-like structure, their acid dissolving normal materials, but barely scratching the specially prepared walls. Phase 1 successful, reported Dr. Stone from the Planetary Command Center. Approximately 3 million Devourers contained in the Australian crucible. Beginning Phase 2, Admiral Chen announced. The containment fields around the crucible's toxic walls failed simultaneously. Radiation flooded the structure in levels that would kill most life forms instantly. The Devourers inside began dying by the thousands, their screeches of agony audible even in the vacuum of space. Queen Zarthak's response was immediate and furious. Her bioship turned toward Earth, broadcasting a roar of rage that made even the human ship's hulls vibrate. More swarms poured down toward the other crucibles as the Queen's anger overrode her tactical planning. "She's taking the bait," Zathara observed, watching the massive bioship descend through Earth's atmosphere. "Just as your psychologists predicted." But something was wrong. Instead of heading for one of the prepared crucibles, Queen Zarthak was directing her personal assault toward the refugee settlement where the Cathara lived. "She knows," Zathara realized with growing horror. "She's going to ignore the traps and attack the settlement directly." Admiral Chen's voice was grim. "All ships converge on the settlement. We're not letting her get through." The human fleet, small as it was, threw itself between the Queen's bioship and the settlement. Their weapons barely scratched the massive creature's hide, but they succeeded in getting her attention. Queen Zarthak turned toward them with the fury of a living nightmare. Zathara made a decision that would have horrified her months earlier. "Admiral, I'm taking the Defiance down to engage her directly. Captain, your ship isn't designed for atmospheric combat." "No, but it's designed for sacrifice." The Defiance plunged through Earth's atmosphere, its hybrid human Cathara hull groaning under the stress. Behind Zathara, her mixed crew of humans and refugees worked with desperate efficiency. They had one chance to save the settlement and everyone in it. Queen Zarthak was massive beyond imagination, her bioship stretching across kilometers of sky. Smaller Devourers swarmed around her like antibodies protecting a virus. But Zathara had learned something important about humans during her time on Earth. They had taught her that sometimes the smallest actions could have the largest consequences. "Target her sensory organs," Zathara commanded. "We're not trying to kill her. We're trying to make her angry enough to follow us." The Defiance's weapons struck Queen Zarthak's eye clusters, causing the massive creature to roar in pain and fury. The bioship turned toward them, abandoning its attack on the settlement to pursue this impudent challenger. Zathara led the Queen on a deadly chase across Earth's sky, her ship dodging between buildings and through mountain valleys. Behind them, the massive bioship followed, destroying everything in its path in its fury to catch the fleeing vessel. "Captain, we're approaching the Sahara Crucible," her navigator reported. "Perfect, take us straight through the center." The Defiance shot into the massive maze, its smaller size allowing it to navigate the twisting passages at high speed. "Kafur." Zarthak followed without thinking, her rage making her careless. As the bioship entered the crucible, automated systems activated. Gravity fields locked onto the massive creature, holding it in place. Containment fields failed throughout the structure, flooding the maze with lethal radiation. But Queen Zarthak was larger and more resilient than her children. The radiation hurt her but didn't kill her immediately. She thrashed against the gravity fields, her struggles threatening to break free. "She's too strong," Dr. Stone reported from the command center. "The containment won't hold much longer." Zathara looked around her bridge at the humans and Cathara, who had become her family over the past months. They had all volunteered for this mission, knowing it might be their last. "Captain," her human weapons officer said quietly, I'm reading massive energy buildup in our reactor core. Zathara nodded. Overload the reactor. Channel all power through the main deflector array. Captain, that will destroy the ship and everyone on it. I know. The Defiance's reactor reached critical mass as Queen Zarthak finally began breaking free from the gravity fields. In the last moment before the explosion, Zathara opened a communication channel to the Queen. This is for my people, and for my new family, she said simply. The ship exploded like a miniature star inside the crucible, the energy release combining with the radiation to create a killing field that even Queen Zarthak couldn't survive. The massive bioship's death scream shook the entire planet as she finally succumbed to the trap. Across the system, the Devourer swarms suddenly stopped their attacks. Without their queen's guiding intelligence, they began fighting among themselves, their unified assault dissolving into chaos. Admiral Chen stood in the command center, watching reports flow in from around the planet. The Crucibles had worked beyond their wildest hopes. Nearly 30 million Devourers were dead, and the surviving swarms were fleeing the system in confusion. Admiral, Dr. Stone said quietly, the Defiance's sacrifice worked. Queen Zarthak is confirmed dead. Admiral Chen nodded, feeling the weight of victory mixed with loss. Through the windows, she could see the refugee settlement in the distance, safe and untouched. Captain Zathara had given her life to protect it, just as her people had once been protected. The galaxy would remember this day, Admiral Chen realized. It would remember that when refugees came seeking shelter, humanity had not just given them a home. They had defended it with everything they had, and taught their guests that sometimes the greatest victories required the greatest sacrifices. In the settlement below, young Kithara played with human children under the afternoon sun, their laughter carrying on the wind. It was a sound worth dying for, and Zathara had known it. 6 months after the Battle of Earth, the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Admiral Sarah Chen walked through the halls of the newly constructed Galactic Refugee Council headquarters, located on the moon that humans called Luna. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Earth hung like a blue jewel against the stars. The planet bore scars from the battle. 17 dead zones marked the locations of the former crucibles, their radioactive signatures visible from orbit as dark patches on the continents. But life had returned to the rest of the world with remarkable resilience. Admiral Chen, the delegates are ready for your address, announced Commander Martinez, her aide-de-camp. The young officer had been promoted after her exceptional work coordinating refugee relief efforts during the crisis. Chen nodded and made her way to the council chamber. What she found there would have been impossible to imagine a year earlier. Representatives from 47 different species sat in carefully designed seating arrangements that accommodated their various physiologies. All of them were refugees who had fled the Devourer swarms. The news of Earth's victory had spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. Species that had cowered in fear for decades suddenly found hope. If humanity could defeat Queen Zarthak, perhaps the Devourer threat wasn't insurmountable after all. Elder Silana of the Kithara delegation stood as Chen entered. The elder had aged visibly since Captain Zathara's sacrifice, but her eyes held a strength that hadn't been there during their first desperate arrival. Admiral Chen, Silana said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. The council has reached unanimous agreement on the proposal. Chen took her place at the center of the circular chamber. Around her, dozens of alien faces watched with expressions of hope and determination. These were beings who had lost everything to the Devourers, yet they had found the courage to fight back. Are you certain about this? Chen asked, looking around the assembled delegates. What we're proposing has never been attempted before. The risks are enormous. A delegate from the Vraxian Republic, a species of crystalline beings who communicated through harmonic vibrations, resonated a response that the translators rendered as, Admiral, our people fled our homeworld when the Devourers came. We have spent 3 years living in converted cargo ships, watching our children grow up without ever touching solid ground. The risk of action cannot be greater than the certainty of continued exile. Delegate Morketh of the hegemony nodded agreement, his reptilian features serious. The humans showed us that the Devourers can be defeated, not through superior firepower, But through superior tactics and the willingness to make hard choices, we have learned from your example. Chen felt the weight of their expectations. In the months since the battle, refugee ships had been arriving at Earth almost daily. Word had spread that humanity not only welcomed the displaced but was willing to fight for them. The lunar facility had been constructed to house the growing alliance of refugee species. The intelligence we've gathered suggests there are at least 12 more Devourer Queens scattered across the galaxy, Chen said, accessing the holographic display at the chamber's center. Each one commands billions of creatures. Even with our combined knowledge and resources, we're talking about a campaign that could last decades. Then we begin today and fight for decades, declared Representative Theiss of the Botanical Collective, her plant-like form shifting colors to emphasize her determination. Our seedlings deserve a future where they need not fear the darkness between stars. Chen activated the display, showing the current state of the galaxy. Red zones marked areas under Devourer control, growing like an infection across the star maps. Yellow areas showed contested regions where various species fought desperate holding actions. Green zones, precious few of them, indicated safe havens like Earth. The plan requires unprecedented cooperation, Chen explained. We're not just talking about military alliance. We need to share technology, resources, and strategic knowledge that most species have guarded as state secrets for millennia. Elder Silana stepped forward, holding a data crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. Admiral, this contains the complete technical specifications for Cathera shield technology, including improvements developed during our collaboration with human engineers. We offer this freely to all species represented here. Her gesture triggered a cascade of similar offerings. The Vraxian delegate produced crystalline memory matrices containing advanced sensor technologies. The hegemony representative shared tactical databases covering 3 centuries of military experience. Species after species stepped forward, offering their most precious technological secrets. Chen watched in amazement as barriers that had existed for thousands of years crumbled in the face of shared desperation and hope. These refugees had learned something that their respective governments had never understood. Survival sometimes required absolute trust. There's something else, Chen said, her voice growing heavy. The strategy that worked against Queen Zarthak won't work again. The other queens will have learned from her death. They'll adapt their tactics and they'll be expecting traps. Then we adapt faster, said Commander Vextar of the Stellar Nomads, a species that had been wandering space for so long they no longer remembered their homeworld. The humans taught us that victory doesn't require overwhelming force. It requires overwhelming ingenuity. The next several hours were spent reviewing tactical plans that pushed the boundaries of conventional warfare. The assembled species had learned from humanity's example, but they were applying those lessons in ways that reflected their own unique capabilities. The Vraxians proposed using their harmonic abilities to disrupt Devourer communication networks. The Botanical Collective had developed biological weapons that could target the insectoid creature's specific vulnerabilities. The Stellar Nomads offered their ancient knowledge of space-time, manipulation to create new types of traps. But it was Elder Silana who presented the most ambitious proposal. We believe it's possible to modify the Crucible technology for mobile deployment, she explained, activating a holographic blueprint. If we can construct ship-mounted versions of the gravity wells and containment systems, we could take the fight to the Devourers instead of waiting for them to come to us. Chen studied the plans with growing excitement. The concept was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of turning planets into weapons, they could turn entire fleets into planet killers, specifically designed to hunt Devourer queens. The power requirements would be enormous, Chen observed. We'd need to develop entirely new reactor technologies. Which brings us to our next proposal, said the Vraxian delegate. We wish to share our knowledge of zero-point energy extraction. Combined with human fusion technology and Cathera power distribution systems, it should provide sufficient energy for the mobile crucibles. Chen looked around the chamber, seeing the same determination in every face that she remembered, from the darkest days of Earth's preparation for battle. These beings had lost their homes, their families, their entire civilizations to the Devourer swarms. But instead of surrendering to despair, they had chosen to fight back. How long do we have? Asked Delegate Morketh. Intelligence suggests the nearest Devourer queen, Malthus the Soul Render, is currently consolidating her forces about 60 light-years from here. Chen replied. Based on her previous patterns, she'll begin expanding her territory again within 18 months. Then we have 18 months to build our first mobile crucible and test our new alliance, Elder Solana said. I propose we name our first ship in honor of those who showed us the way. Chen felt her throat tighten with emotion. What do you have in mind? The GRCS Zethara, Solana replied. The first ship of the Galactic Refugee Council to carry the fight back to those who scattered us across the stars. The vote was unanimous. As the delegates began planning the construction of humanity's first truly interstellar warship, Chen stepped back to the observation windows. Earth hung below them, scarred but unbroken, surrounded by the growing fleet of refugee vessels that had become humanity's first interstellar allies. Captain Zethara had given her life to save a refugee settlement. Her sacrifice had become the foundation for something larger than anyone could have imagined. A galaxy-spanning alliance of the displaced and desperate, united in their determination to reclaim what had been taken from them. The stars no longer looked cold and hostile to Chen. They looked like a challenge, and humanity had never been good at backing down from challenges. 2 years after the Battle of Earth, the galaxy trembled as the GRCS Zethara dropped out of hyperspace in the Kepler 442 system. The massive vessel was unlike anything the universe had ever seen. A fusion of technologies from dozens of species, designed for a single purpose. Where the original crucibles had been stationary traps, the Zethara was a mobile weapon of vengeance. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the ship's command bridge, watching the tactical displays show the enemy positions ahead. Queen Malthus, the Soul Render, had made this system her stronghold, using the planets as breeding grounds for her swarms. Billions of Devourers swarmed through the space between worlds, their bioships forming defensive formations around their queen's massive flagship. Admiral, we're receiving data from the advanced scouts, reported Commander Torres, who had transferred from Earth's Defense Force to join the new Galactic Refugee Council fleet. Enemy strength is confirmed at approximately 8 billion individual units. Chen nodded, feeling the familiar weight of impossible odds. But this time humanity wasn't facing the threat alone. Around the Zethara, 300 vessels from 47 different species maintained formation. Each ship represented refugees who had found new purpose in the alliance. Elder Solana approached from her position at the Cathara tactical station. In the 2 years since Captain Zethara's sacrifice, the Elder had become Chen's closest advisor and friend. Her people's knowledge of Devourer behavior had proven invaluable in planning this campaign. Admiral, our sensor readings confirm what we suspected, Solana said, her voice tight with controlled anger. Queen Malthus is using captured refugees as living shields around her flagship. There are at least 50,000 beings trapped in biopods on her ship's hull. Chen felt her jaw clench. This was the Devourer's newest tactic, learned from their queen's death at Earth. They had begun capturing refugees instead of simply consuming them, using them as protection against the Alliance's increasingly aggressive campaigns. Any sign that the prisoners are still alive? Chen asked. Dr. Rebecca Stone, now serving as the Alliance's chief science officer, consulted her readings. Biosigns are positive. They're alive but sedated. The Queen is keeping them as leverage. The bridge fell silent as everyone contemplated the horrible choice ahead. The mobile crucible technology could destroy Queen Malthus and her entire swarm, but only at the cost of the innocent lives she was using as shields. Admiral, came a voice from the communication station. We're receiving a transmission from Queen Malthus herself. Put it through. The main screen filled with an image that made several bridge officers step back in revulsion. Queen Malthus was even more horrible than Zarthak had been. Her bioship body covered in what looked like screaming faces twisted into her flesh. When she spoke, her voice was a symphony of agony. Humans. She hissed, the word dripping with contempt. You think your little alliance frightens me? Look upon what I hold. The view shifted to show the prisoners trapped in biopods, their faces visible through translucent membranes. Children from a dozen species. Elders who fled my sister's wrath. Artists and scientists and dreamers all kept alive for this moment. Chen forced herself to look at the prisoners, seeing the terror in their faces. Among them, she recognized some of the refugees who had passed through Earth settlement programs. What do you want? Chen asked. Your surrender. Disband your pathetic alliance and return to your individual worlds. I will release half the prisoners to show my mercy. The other half will serve as my entertainment. The connection ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Chen looked around at her diverse crew, seeing the same anguish in their faces that she felt in her heart. They had come so far, built so much, only to face an impossible choice. "Admiral," Elder Silana said quietly, "there may be another option." "I'm listening." "The biopods that hold the prisoners are connected to Queen Malthus's nervous system. She uses them to feed off their terror and despair, but those same connections could be used to transmit something else." Dr. Stone caught on immediately. A neural virus, something that could disrupt her control systems. "It would require someone to get close enough to the Queen to plant the virus directly," Silana continued, "and it would have to be someone with intimate knowledge of both devourer biology and the technical systems we've developed." Chen realized what the Elder was proposing. "You want to go over there personally? It's the only way to save the prisoners and complete our mission." Before Chen could object, other voices joined the conversation. Commander Vextar of the Stellar Nomads volunteered his ship for the insertion mission. Dr. Stone offered to modify the virus for maximum effectiveness. Representatives from a dozen species stepped forward with support and resources. "This isn't a suicide mission," Chen said firmly. "We go in, we plant the virus, we extract the prisoners, and we all come home." 6 hours later, a small fleet of specially modified ships approached Queen Malthus's flagship under the pretense of negotiating surrender terms. The Devourers allowed them to approach, confident in their queen's psychological advantage. Elder Silana piloted the lead insertion craft, accompanied by a hand-picked team of volunteers from multiple species. In her 4 hands, she carried the neural virus that Dr. Stone had designed, a digital plague that would spread through the Queen's nervous system and disrupt her control over both her swarms and her prisoners. The bioship's interior was a nightmare of living tissue and mechanical augmentations. Acid dripped from the walls, and the air itself seemed to crawl with microscopic predators. But Silana pushed forward, guided by her hatred for what the Devourers had done to her people. She found Queen Malthus in the ship's heart, connected to thousands of neural interfaces that linked her to her swarms. The prisoners hung around her like grotesque decorations, their biopods feeding their terror directly into her consciousness. "So brave," Queen Malthus taunted as Silana approached. "Come to offer yourself as a replacement for these others?" "I came to give you a gift," Silana replied, producing the virus container. "A message from Captain Zethara." Before the Queen could react, Silana activated the device. The neural virus erupted outward, racing through the bioship's nervous system faster than Queen Malthus could counteract it. The massive creature began convulsing as her control systems failed one by one. "Now," Silana shouted into her communicator. Across the fleet, the Alliance ships opened fire with weapons specifically designed to target Devourer weak points. But their primary goal wasn't destruction, it was distraction. While Queen Malthus fought the virus in her system, extraction teams swarmed her flagship to rescue the prisoners. The Queen's death throes shook the entire bioship. As her nervous system collapsed, the prisoners' biopods opened automatically, releasing 50,000 beings who had given up hope of ever seeing freedom again. Elder Silana helped the last group of prisoners reach the extraction ships, her own body showing the effects of exposure to the bioship's toxic environment. As they fled the dying vessel, she looked back to see Queen Malthus's flagship tearing itself apart from within. "The virus worked perfectly," Dr. Stone reported from the Zethara. "The Queen is dead and her swarms are already fragmenting. But the victory came at a cost." Elder Silana collapsed as soon as she reached the medical bay, her body overwhelmed by the bioship's toxins. As doctors from multiple species worked to save her, she grabbed Admiral Chen's hand with surprising strength. "The prisoners," she whispered. "Are they safe?" "They're safe," Chen confirmed. "All 50,000 of them," Silana smiled. "Captain Zethara would be proud. We've kept our promise to protect those who seek refuge." As the Elder slipped into unconsciousness, Chen looked out at the fleet of refugee ships that had become a force of liberation. In the past 2 years, they had destroyed 3 Devourer queens and freed millions of prisoners. The galaxy was beginning to fight back. The wounded bioship finally exploded in a burst of light that illuminated the entire fleet. Where Queen Malthus had once terrorized entire star systems, now there was only debris and the scattered remnants of a broken swarm. Admiral Chen walked to the bridge's observation deck. watching as the rescued prisoners were transferred to hospital ships staffed by volunteers from across the Alliance. Children who had been captives hours earlier now played in safe corridors. Families torn apart by the Devourers were reunited. "Admiral," Commander Torres said, approaching with the latest intelligence reports. "We're receiving surrender requests from Devourer outposts throughout this sector. Word of the Queen's death is spreading faster than we expected." Chen nodded, feeling a satisfaction that went deeper than military victory. They had proven that the Devourers could be defeated without sacrificing their own humanity. The Alliance had found a way to wage war while still maintaining their commitment to protecting the innocent. In the medical bay, Elder Solana was stabilizing under the care of doctors who represented a dozen different species working together. She would recover, Dr. Stone assured Chen, and continue to serve as a bridge between the Cathera refugees and their human hosts.